Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fact Check Simplified. Today, we're talking about that time when buying a pair of socks online didn't require signing a lifelong digital contract. We're diving into the absolute chaos of how every single purchase, from a $70 video game to a 99-cent pack of gum, now demands an account, a password, and a blood oath to receive marketing emails. Until the heat death of the universe. Think of it as every company on earth attending the same mandatory seminar titled How to Turn a One-Time Customer into an Unpaid Data Entry Intern for Life. And they all took it way too seriously. We're going to untangle this glorious mess of corporate incentives, dark patterns, and the slow, methodical murder of the guest checkout button. Because oversimplifying a global economic tidal wave, driven by surveillance capitalism, is kind of our thing. Before the inevitable corporate betrayal starts, if you enjoy this highly dramatic but fun version of Modern Facts, please hit that like and subscribe button. Seriously, it helps us pay the electric bill for our overpriced standing desks. All right, grab an iced latte. Things are about to get unnecessarily infuriating. Let's rewind the clock back to a simpler, more pixelated time. An era before infinite scroll, before influencers, before your refrigerator had a Twitter account. This was the Wild West of the early 2000s internet, a digital landscape of clunky Geocities pages, screeching dial-up modems, and a beautiful, chaotic sense of anonymity. And in this Wild West, there was a golden rule for anyone trying to sell anything: do not, under any circumstances, get in the way of the money. The idea of putting your credit card information into a mysterious web form was already a huge leap of faith for most people. It felt sketchy. It felt like handing your wallet to a stranger in a trench coat who promised they'd email you a book in 5 to 7 business days. Because of this universal skepticism, early e-commerce was built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated desperation. The primary goal of any online store, from the biggest players to the tiniest digital mom-and-pop shops, was to reduce friction. Friction was the enemy. Friction was any extra click, any confusing button, any unnecessary field that might give the customer a split second to reconsider their purchase and close the browser tab. Forever, it was a paranoid, high-stakes game of digital psychology. Does this button look untrustworthy? Is this font too weird? Is asking for their middle initial a step too far? The entire process had to be smoother than a freshly zombonied ice rink. This obsession with a frictionless experience gave birth to a glorious, now mythical creature, the truly anonymous purchase. You'd find your item a DVD, a novelty t-shirt, a book you'd probably never read, and you'd proceed to a page that asks for only the bare essentials: name, address, payment info. That was it. The transaction was a self-contained universe. It had a clean beginning and a definitive end. You paid the money, they shipped the product. The relationship was over. It was the digital equivalent of buying a newspaper with cash from a corner store. The clerk didn't ask for your email address to send you personalized promotions for other newspapers. He didn't demand you create a password to track your future reading habits. He just took your dollar and you walked away. This was the pre-account golden age. A brief, shining moment where a transaction was just a transaction, not the opening ceremony of a lifelong, one-sided relationship. The guest checkout button wasn't a hidden, begrudgingly offered alternative buried in the footer of the page. It was the main event. It was the default. It was the proud, welcoming gateway to commerce. The underlying logic was simple. The cause: massive consumer distrust and a desperate need to make online shopping feel safe. The effect: businesses prioritize the immediate sale above all else. They'd rather have your $20 now with no strings attached than risk losing it by asking for a long-term commitment. And the consequence: accidental privacy. For a short time, we were all digital ghosts drifting through online stores, leaving nothing behind but a shipping address and a few dollars. Companies didn't get you, they just got your order. Of course, we were all living on borrowed time. This entire system was a beautiful, magnificent bug in the source code of what would become modern capitalism, not a feature. We, the consumers, thought this was the natural state of things. We assumed the internet would continue to be this collection of discrete, transactional tools. But in boardrooms across Silicon Valley and beyond, a different conversation was happening. The language was shifting. They weren't talking about customers anymore. They were talking about users. They weren't focused on sales, but on engagement and customer lifetime value. They realized the real money wasn't in the single transaction for a $20 book. The real money was in the person buying the book. What else would they buy? What are their friends buying? Can we predict what they'll want to buy next year? Next decade? The anonymous cash transaction was a dead end. It yielded no data. It offered no path to future revenue. It was a closed loop. The new obsession was creating an open-loop system, where every interaction was just the beginning of the next one. They needed a hook, a digital anchor to tie you to their brand forever. They needed a record, a file, a profile. They needed you to stop being a ghost in the machine and become a permanent, trackable resident. They needed you to have an account. And so, with the best of intentions and the worst of long-term consequences, they began building the trap, baiting it with the irresistible promise of convenience. The age of innocence was officially over. The land rush for our digital souls was about to begin. So how do you convince an entire generation of paranoid dial-up users, people who were still nervous about putting their credit card numbers into a computer, to willingly chain themselves to your brand for eternity? You don't do it with force, you do it with a smile. You do it by solving a problem they genuinely have. And you make the solution so seductively simple that they don't notice the hidden cost. Until it is far, far too late. This was the original sin of modern e-commerce, the grand, foundational maneuver that set the stage for the next decades of digital surveillance. It wasn't a hack or a scam. It was a feature. A brilliant, Trojan horse of a feature called convenience. The pioneers of this were the titans. The early behemoths clawing their way to the top of the digital food chain. Think Amazon. Think eBay. They saw the landscape of abandoned shopping carts and recognized it for what it was, a multi-billion-dollar graveyard of good intentions. Why did people abandon their carts? Friction. It was always friction. Finding your wallet. Typing out your 16-digit card number. Making a typo. Typing it again. Realizing you forgot the expiration date. Finding your wallet again. Then typing in your full shipping address, city, state, and zip code. It was a digital obstacle course, and at any point, the user could just say, "You know what? Never mind." Then the serpent entered the digital Garden of Eden with a beautiful, simple proposition. What if you only had to do that once? What if we, the benevolent corporation, could remember all that tedious information for you? Just create an account. Give us a username and a password. In return, we will grant you the divine power of one-click checkout. It was a stroke of absolute, earth-shattering genius. They took the single most annoying part of their own business model and offered to eliminate it, framing this as a generous gift. They weren't asking for your data to build a profile on you. Heavens, no. They were simply offering to be your personal digital butler, holding your wallet and address book so you wouldn't have to be bothered. Cue the angelic choir. For the consumer, it felt like magic. A revolution. Suddenly, buying something online went from a 5-minute chore to a 1-second impulse. See it. Click it. Done. A drone is already on its way to your house with your new ergonomic keyboard. It was intoxicating. It was frictionless. It was the convenience we had all apparently been dreaming of. We signed up in droves, gleefully handing over our names, our addresses, our payment details, and linking them all together under a single, permanent identity. Let us run the chain of events because it is so clean it is almost poetic. Cause, the universal, legitimate annoyance of re-entering shipping and payment information for every single purchase. Online. Effect, a few tech giants offered to securely save this information within a user account, marketing it as a time-saving perk that would unlock features like one-click buying. Consequence, for the first time, a user's identity, their financial information, and their complete purchase history were all permanently fused together in a single, company-owned database, creating the foundational asset of the modern data economy. This wasn't just a feature. It was a profound philosophical shift. It changed the very nature of an online store. It was no longer a simple storefront you visited. It was now a club you joined. It was a destination. The account was your membership card. Your shopping cart wasn't a temporary vessel anymore. It was a permanent file cabinet with your name on it, meticulously recording everything you ever considered buying, everything you looked at, everything you put back on the shelf. The entire act of shopping became an act of data creation. We thought we were saving ourselves a few minutes of typing. They knew they were building the most detailed ledgers of human desire ever conceived, and here's the most brilliant, most insidious part of the whole scheme. It felt like our idea. It felt like we were opting into a premium experience. We were the savvy shoppers who created an account to get the fast lane. We were the ones in control. This meta-commentary writes itself. The entire premise was a psychological masterpiece. They made total surveillance feel like a velvet rope into a VIP lounge. By framing permanent data storage as a personal convenience, they got millions of people to voluntarily build their own digital dossiers, one saved credit card number at a time. Amazon even patented one-click buying in 1999, US patent 5,960,411. A document that should be hanging in a museum of devastatingly effective ideas. This wasn't an accident, it was a meticulously engineered strategy. At this point, it was still largely the domain of the giants. Your average online store selling novelty socks or artisanal cheese hadn't quite caught on. They were still playing by the old rules, happy to take your money via the humble guest checkout, but they were watching. Oh, they were watching. They saw the immense power these accounts gave the big players. The ability to track a customer's journey. The power to send targeted "we noticed you were looking at this" emails. The ability to analyze purchasing trends on a massive scale. They saw Amazon building an empire not just on selling things, but on knowing things, and they all wanted in. The original sin had been committed, and the gospel of convenience was about to spread. Starting with a polite, seemingly harmless little question. The original sin had been committed, the golden apple of convenience had been eaten, and the smaller players of the e-commerce world were looking on with a biblical level of envy. They saw the empires being built by Amazon and eBay not on products, but on profiles. They were selling books, sure, but they were hoarding identities. And every small online retailer, from the guy selling custom guitar picks to the woman shipping artisanal dog treats, wanted a taste of that power, but they had a problem. They weren't Amazon. They didn't have the gravitational pull, the brand loyalty, or the sheer market dominance to simply demand that every customer create an account. Trying to force a sign-up was commercial suicide. The friction would send their customers screaming back to the search results page. So, they needed a softer approach, a more subtle, more insidious method of data collection. They couldn't build a fortress and demand you enter. They had to leave the front door open and gently persuade you to hand over the keys on your way out. And thus, the great lie of the optional account was born. It was the perfect gateway drug. It arrived not as a roadblock at the beginning of your purchase, but as a friendly, helpful suggestion at the very end. You'd gone through the whole rigmarole, filling your cart, typing your address, entering your payment info. You were one single click away from completion. Your guard was down. Your mission was almost complete. Then the pop-up would appear, a gentle, unassuming little box. Want to save your information for a faster checkout next time? Just create a password below. It was beautiful in its simplicity. It wasn't a demand, it was a question, a helpful offer. A digital valet asking if you'd like him to park your data for you. Who could say no to that? It felt like a smart, efficient thing to do. Of course I'll want to buy more artisanal dog treats in the future. Why wouldn't I save myself a few minutes? So you'd type in a password, probably the same one you use for everything else, and click submit. And just like that, you were caught. You had voluntarily forged the first link in a chain that would eventually wrap around your entire digital life. This was the master stroke. The tactic spread like wildfire because it worked. It presented a long-term commitment as a short-term convenience. The retailers weren't asking you to sign up for our marketing list or agree to be tracked. They were asking if you wanted to save your progress. It was the language of video games applied to commerce, and it was lethally effective. Soon, every checkout page on the internet had this polite little fork in the road. You could continue as a guest, a word that now subtly implied you were an outsider, a tourist. Or you could become an insider, a member, part of the family. Buying a tube of toothpaste now came with an invitation to join a community. Let's break down the mechanics of this polite little heist. Cause smaller online stores desperately wanted the data collecting power of the tech giants, but couldn't risk the sales friction of a mandatory sign-up wall. Effect, they introduced the optional account creation at the end of the checkout process, framing it as a simple, time-saving feature for the customer's benefit. Consequence, this completely normalized the idea that your email address was the standard default price of admission for a transaction. It wasn't just a destination for a receipt anymore, it became your universal customer ID, the key that every single merchant, big or small, now expected to possess. This was also the moment when the incentive creep began. At first, the only reward for signing up was the vague promise of a faster checkout next time, but that wasn't enough. So they sweetened the pot. Create an account and get 5% off your next order, then 10%. Then it was free shipping. The blackmail, which we'll see perfected later, started here. In these gentle, optional nudges, they were systematically recalibrating our sense of value. The default option, checking out as a guest, was slowly being reframed as the sucker's choice. You weren't just protecting your privacy by not signing up, you were actively, foolishly leaving money on the table. Why would anyone do that? Behind the scenes, A technological revolution was making this all incredibly easy: the rise of email marketing. Platforms like MailChimp gave even the smallest one-person Shopify store the power of a Fortune 500 marketing department. Suddenly, collecting emails wasn't just for data storage, it was for active, relentless marketing. That optional little sign-up box was a direct funnel into a sophisticated machine, designed to send you abandoned cart reminders, weekly promotions, birthday coupons, and "we miss you" emails, all automated and optimized to extract maximum value from your inbox. The optional account was the friendly face of a massive, hungry data harvesting apparatus that was now available to everyone. Surveillance had been democratized. We, the users, barely noticed. An account here, an account there. What was the harm? Our inboxes got a little fuller, sure, but we were getting discounts. It seemed like a fair trade. We were so focused on the immediate, tangible reward, that glorious 10% off coupon, that we completely failed to grasp the long-term, abstract cost. We were trading a finite resource, our privacy and attention, for an endless barrage of marketing. We were being trained, one polite pop-up at a time, to believe that a commercial transaction was no longer a discrete event, but the start of an ongoing and often inescapable conversation. The optional account was the friendly handshake that pulled you into the room. Soon, they would start locking the door behind you. The polite invitation had been sent. The trap had been baited with discounts and promises of a faster tomorrow. Millions of us had RSVP'd, creating accounts for everything from pet food to paper towels. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. For the rapidly growing data economy, every single person who slipped through the cracks using the humble guest checkout was a failure, a lost asset, a ghost in the machine who left behind nothing but a one-time payment. And so, the industry moved on to the next phase of its grand plan. If gentle persuasion and attractive incentives wouldn't get them a 100% conversion rate, then they would resort to something far more effective: psychological warfare. This was the beginning of the slow, painful, and deeply disrespectful demise of the guest checkout. We are gathered here today to mourn a dear, departed friend, that beautiful, welcoming button. Once the proud centerpiece of any checkout page, began its tragic decline. At first, the changes were subtle. The checkout as a guest button, once a vibrant, optimistic green or blue, was suddenly rendered in a sad, funereal gray. It lost its bold, capital letters and was demoted to a lowercase, barely there link. Meanwhile, the create an account or sign in button seemed to feed on its life force, growing larger, brighter, and more offensively cheerful with every passing month. It was a masterclass in visual hierarchy, a design choice that screamed, "This is the correct path. You fool, that other link over there is for sad, lonely people who hate convenience." Then they started moving it. The guest option, which used to sit proudly next to the sign-in fields, was banished to the digital hinterlands. It was shoved below the fold, forcing you to scroll past acres of promotional material to find it. It was hidden in a drop-down menu under a confusingly named tab like More Options or Customer Care. Finding the guest checkout became a digital scavenger hunt, a test of your willpower and your screen's resolution. The goal was simple: to make the process of avoiding an account so annoying that creating one felt like a sweet relief. It was no longer about offering a better alternative. It was about making the old way deliberately, punishingly worse. This is where the art of the dark pattern truly came into its own. Designers, once tasked with making websites user-friendly, were now being paid to make them user-hostile in very specific, targeted ways. The guest checkout path became a miserable slog. You'd click the sad, gray link and be taken to a form that was twice as long as the account creation form. They'd ask for your phone number, your date of birth, your favorite color, information they had no conceivable need for. Under the guise of improving your experience, the page would accidentally time out and refresh, clearing all your data. The continue button would be obscured by a pop-up begging you, one last time, to reconsider your foolish account-less existence. Let's trace this descent into user-unfriendly madness. Cause, companies, now fully addicted to the steady stream of data from user accounts, viewed every guest transaction as a significant missed opportunity for future marketing and data profiling. Effect, they systematically redesigned their websites to add friction and frustration to the guest checkout process, using dark patterns to make it the least appealing and most difficult path. Consequence, the very concept of genuine choice was eroded. Users were actively steered, fatigued, or outright tricked into creating an account, making registration the de facto mandatory path through sheer psychological exhaustion. The ultimate act of betrayal was the invention of the guest account. This was the final, cynical nail in the coffin. You'd fight your way through the terrible user interface, find the hidden link, fill out the ridiculously long form, and finally click place order, and on the confirmation screen, a cheerful message would appear. For your convenience, we've saved your details and created a guest account for you. Just choose a password to access it next time. It was a digital checkmate. They let you think you were checking out as a guest, only to force you into an account at the last possible second. You were trapped. The Roach Motel had claimed another victim, easy to check in, impossible to check out. This whole strategy was a profound violation of the unspoken contract between a business and a customer. The website was no longer a neutral tool for commerce. It was now an active adversary, using carefully crafted psychological tricks to manipulate you into a decision you were trying to avoid. It was the digital equivalent of a fast food restaurant making you solve a riddle to get your order, but offering you a VIP membership that lets you skip the line. The system was rigged, and the house always wanted you to be a member. By the end of this campaign, the beautiful button for anonymous shopping was a ghost of its former self. It had been shrunken, hidden, and booby-trapped. The process it guarded now demanded more information than a CIA background check, all while the smiling, friendly sign-up button promised a world of frictionless ease. We had been successfully herded, like sheep, into the waiting arms of the account ecosystem. The choice was, for all intents and purposes, gone. But now that they had us, now that they had our names, our emails, our passwords, what exactly were they planning to do with them? The answer was far bigger and more lucrative than just sending us a few coupons. We'd been successfully corralled. The guest checkout was a smoldering ruin, and our digital landscape was now dotted with dozens, soon to be hundreds, of little accounts we'd created in moments of weakness for a 10% discount. We had given every online merchant the keys to our inboxes and a permanent record of our transactions. So, what happened next? What did they do with this unprecedented treasure trove of information? The answer, of course, is that it went to market, not the friendly, brightly lit market where you buy your groceries, but a shadowy, unregulated back alley market where the product being sold was us. Enter the data brokers. This is the part of the story where a new character emerges from the wings, a character nobody knew was in the play. Data brokers are the invisible architects of the surveillance economy. They don't produce anything. They don't sell you a tangible product. Their entire business model is to know everything about you and sell that knowledge to anyone who will pay. They are the information arms dealers of the 21st century, operating in a legal gray area the size of a continent, buying, selling, and trading scraps of our digital lives. Like commodities on a stock exchange, here's how it worked. The online shoe store where you bought a pair of running shoes now had your name, your address, your shoe size, and your email. On its own, that data is moderately useful to them. They can email you about future shoe sales. Great, but that's small potatoes. The real magic, the terrifying, world-changing magic, happens when you aggregate. The data brokers realized that while one puzzle piece is interesting, 1,000 puzzle pieces from 1,000 different boxes could be assembled into a complete, high-definition picture of a person's life, and the one piece that connected everything, the universal key that could unlock and link all these disparate data sets, was the email address we had been so casually handing out. Your email became the social security number for modern advertising. It was the permanent, unique identifier that followed you across the internet. A data broker could buy a list from the shoe store. They could buy another list from the online pizza place you order from every Friday. They could buy another from the pharmacy where you get your allergy medication, and another from the political campaign you once donated $5 to. They scraped public records, warranty cards, contest entries, anything and everything. Then, using your email address as the master key, they stitched it all together. Suddenly, they didn't just know you bought shoes. They knew you were a size 10 who runs, orders pepperoni pizza, suffers from seasonal allergies, and leans a certain way politically. This is the chain reaction that built the modern world. Cause hundreds of individual companies were now sitting on huge, but separate, databases of customer information, all neatly organized by email address. Effect, the data brokerage industry exploded, creating a marketplace to buy and consolidate this information, merging it into colossal master profiles of nearly every consumer on the planet. Consequence, your simple act of creating an account to buy one thing was implicitly leveraged to build a terrifyingly comprehensive and permanent dossier about your habits, health, income, and interests, which was then sold and resold in a completely opaque market. And where did we agree to this? We agreed in paragraph 17, subsection B, of the 48-page terms of service agreement that we all scrolled past and clicked accept on in 0.7 seconds. That was the legal fig leaf. That dense, unreadable wall of text was our signature on a contract that said, "Sure, you can have my data, and you can give it to your trusted partners." A term so vague it could include anyone from your payment processor to a shadowy data mining firm in a bunker somewhere. We thought we were agreeing to the terms of a single transaction. We were actually opting into a global surveillance apparatus. The profiles they built were and are chillingly detailed. They go far beyond likes to run. They include hundreds, sometimes thousands of data points, your estimated income, your credit worthiness, whether you're married or divorced, if you have kids, what kind of car you drive. But then it gets into the inferred data, the assumptions they make about you. Categories like likely to be pregnant, at risk for diabetes, potential investor in cryptocurrency, or susceptible to fad diets. You, the product, were being sorted, categorized, and packaged for sale. You were no longer just a person. You were a collection of probabilities, a target profile, waiting to be activated. This entire multi-billion-dollar industry was built in the shadows, on the back of the account creation mania we just lived through. We were building the database for them, one discounted purchase at a time. The companies we gave our data to made money selling us things, and then they made money again selling us. But this raised a new marketing problem. Surveillance is not a good look. How could they justify this level of data collection to the public? If anyone started asking questions, they needed to rebrand it. They needed to make us feel like this constant monitoring was not a creepy liability, but a wonderful, exclusive benefit. They needed to make us feel loyal. The data brokers were humming along in the background, stitching together the fabric of our digital lives in the shadows, but on the front lines, the companies who were actually collecting our information faced a looming public relations nightmare. Surveillance is a terrible marketing buzzword. We ray building a detailed psychological profile on you to better predict your future spending habits doesn't look great on a billboard. They needed a rebrand. They needed to take this creepy, one-sided data extraction and disguise it as something fun, exclusive, and beneficial. They needed to make us feel not just complicit, but special. So, you don't call it surveillance, you call it a rewards program. Thus began the age of the loyalty program paradox, the single most brilliant marketing pivot of the last 20 years. Loyalty cards weren't a new idea, of course. We'd had the buy 9 sandwiches, get the 10th one free paper punch cards for decades, but those were beautifully simple and, crucially, anonymous. The sandwich shop owner didn't know your name, your email, or what you'd be doing next Tuesday. The new digital loyalty program, however, was a different beast entirely. It was a punch card with a Ph.D. in behavioral psychology and a direct line to a server farm in Utah. The new loyalty program was inextricably linked to the mandatory account you now had. To join, you had to be a member. To get your points, you had to be logged in. Every single transaction, every click, every item you browsed was now meticulously recorded and credited to your permanent profile, all under the cheerful guise of earning you rewards. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. It took the abstract, unsettling idea of being tracked and replaced it with the concrete, satisfying dopamine hit of earning points. We stopped thinking about what we were giving away and started focusing on what we were getting. And this is the paradox, the beautiful, cynical heart of the entire operation. The rewards were a distraction. They were a cheap price to pay for the real prize, your data. Companies promised you exclusive rewards for your loyalty, but the data you gave them in return was infinitely more valuable. They used it to build a profile so surgically precise that they could optimize everything to extract the maximum amount of money from you over your lifetime. They knew when you were most likely to buy, what kind of promotions you were most susceptible to. And thanks to A/B testing, they could even figure out if you were the type of person who would pay more for the exact same product as someone else. This is called price discrimination, and it's the loyalty program's secret superpower. Your reward for being a loyal customer was that the company now had a detailed instruction manual on how to make you spend more money. Let's map out this glorious grift. Cause companies needed a positive, consumer-friendly justification for the constant, granular tracking of every single purchase and interaction. Effect, they launched account-based loyalty and VIP programs that gamified the shopping experience, offering trivial rewards like points and discounts in exchange for formal consent to be monitored. Consequence, this masterfully turned data collection from a shady background activity into a fun, engaging game that customers actively and enthusiastically participated in, making them willing accomplices in the construction of their own hyper-detailed consumer profiles. It was all about gamification. They turned shopping into a video game. Suddenly, there were tiers: silver, gold, platinum, diamond, vibranium status. You weren't just a customer anymore, you were on a quest to level up. You'd get emails with challenges: spend $50 this week to unlock a 2x point multiplier. You were grinding for XP to unlock the legendary status of platinum customer, and the reward was a free birthday cupcake and the right to be first in line for the next big sale. It leveraged the most basic parts of human psychology: the desire to achieve, to compete, to get a deal, to feel like a VIP. Starbucks Rewards is perhaps the Sistine Chapel of this model. It's a closed-loop ecosystem of surveillance masquerading as a coffee club, by forcing you to load money onto their app to get the best rewards. They created their own private financial system where they can track every single latte, every scone, every purchase, linking it all to your single account. They know your daily routine. They know your go-to order. They know how to nudge you with a notification to come in on a slow afternoon. It's a work of art, and millions of people happily participate in it every single day. So we entered the program. We downloaded the apps. We started chasing the points. We felt smart. We felt savvy. We were beating the system, but we had been completely and totally outplayed. We were so busy collecting our little digital breadcrumbs that we didn't notice the entire system was designed to lead us right back to the store, over and over again, in the most profitable way possible for them. We had been successfully tricked into not only accepting surveillance, but demanding it. But the system could still be more efficient. What if signing up and logging in could be even easier? What if you could use an account you already trusted, an account you used every single day, to join all these new programs? What if Google and Facebook could just handle it for you? The walls of the garden were about to get much, much higher. The system was working beautifully. We were happily signing up for accounts, chasing loyalty points, and feeling like savvy VIPs, all while the back-end machinery of the data economy churned our habits into sellable assets. But a new form of friction had emerged. We, the users, were now the exhausted, unwilling managers of a sprawling portfolio of digital identities. You had your shoe store password, your pizza place password, your pharmacy password, your airline password. Each one needed to be unique, have a capital letter, a number, a special character, and the blood of an ancient god. It was impossible. It was exhausting. We were drowning in a sea of forgotten passwords and reset your password emails. And just as we reached the peak of this password fatigue, a savior appeared, or at least, it was dressed like one. Descending from the heavens of Silicon Valley came to beautiful, simple, gloriously convenient buttons. Log in with Facebook and log in with Google. Here was the ultimate solution, the final evolution of convenience. No more typing, no more creating new passwords, no more trying to remember if you were password 123 or $W0'd. Just one click, and you were in. The digital gates to any store, service, or community would swing open before you. It was a miracle. It was a Trojan horse. On the outside, it was a magnificent gift. It solved a genuine, universal problem, but inside that beautiful wooden horse was a silent, invisible army of data trackers ready to pour out and create a permanent, unbreakable link between your social life and your commercial life. It was presented as a selfless act of simplification from the benevolent giants of tech. What it actually was the most brilliant strategic maneuver yet. Facebook and Google realized they didn't need to own every store on the internet. They just needed to own the front door. Here's how the two-way trap worked. When you arrive at a new website, say an online store for novelty socks, and click sign up with Facebook, a permissions box would pop up. For you, the benefit was clear. You didn't have to fill out a form. But for the sock store, the benefit was enormous. They didn't just get an email address you might have made up. They got your real, Facebook verified name, your real email, often your profile picture, maybe your age, maybe even access to your friends list. They were getting a high-quality, pre-packaged dossier on a new customer, delivered on a silver platter by Mark Zuckerberg. But the real winner was the platform. The second you clicked allow, a signal was sent back to the mothership, a little ping that essentially said, user number for B7AC9, the one who likes all those cat videos and lives in Ohio. Just created an account at https://www.google.com, search Q equals noveltysocks.com. Boom! Facebook now had a confirmed, verified data point about your interests and activities outside of Facebook. They were building a shadow profile of your entire life across the web. The same was true for Google. Every click on that button was another entry in the Graham ledger of You, confirming your connection to another service, another brand, another community. It was the holy grail of data collection, a map of your complete digital footprint. Let's follow the chain of this magnificent deception. Cause: consumers were overwhelmed by password fatigue. The security risk and mental burden of managing hundreds of unique accounts for different websites. Effect: tech giants like Facebook and Google introduced social sign-on buttons, offering a one-click solution to create and log into third-party accounts using your existing social media profile. Consequence: this created a vast, interconnected web of data sharing. Retailers got your verified personal info, while the tech giants got to track your behavior across the entire internet, effectively dissolving any remaining privacy barrier between your social identity and your consumer identity. And all of this was authorized by you in a split-second click on a permissions pop-up that nobody, and I mean nobody, ever actually read. https://www.google.com search Q equals noveltysocks.com would like to access your public profile, access your email address, post on your behalf. We barely register the words before our brains, trained by years of pop-ups, would identify the big blue allow button and click it to make the box go away. It was the digital equivalent of a friendly stranger asking to borrow your house keys, and you just hand them over without a second thought because he's smiling. This move was strategically breathtaking by becoming the universal passport control for the internet. These platforms inserted themselves as the indispensable middlemen for digital identity itself. The web was no longer a collection of sovereign islands you visited. It was becoming a federation of states, and you needed a visa from the United States of Facebook to travel between them. Every time you used a social login, you were getting your passport stamped and handing a copy of your full travel itinerary to the central government. The data streams were now flowing in a complex, multi-directional web. From you to the retailer, from the retailer back to you, and now, from both of you, straight into the insatiable data vaults of the biggest companies the world had ever known. The trap was now sophisticated, interconnected, and powered by our own desperate desire for one less password to remember. And it was about to go mobile. The data sharing pact between retailers and the tech giants was sealed. The Trojan horse of social logins had successfully breached the walls of the desktop browser, creating an intricate, interconnected web of surveillance. Every click, every purchase, every like was now a node in a vast network of information with you, the user, tangled squarely in the middle. The system was elegant, efficient, and deeply invasive. But the final frontier wasn't the computer on your desk, it was the supercomputer in your pocket. Enter the smartphone. The launch of the Apple App Store in 2008, followed by Google's Android market, was the Cambrian explosion for our data-driven ecosystem. It didn't just put the internet in our hands. It created an entirely new paradigm for corporate interaction. Suddenly, a simple website felt old-fashioned, passive. The real prize was a permanent, branded embassy on the home screen of your phone, and thus began the apocalypse. It was a frantic, hysterical gold rush where every company, big and small, became convinced that if they didn't have their own app, they would simply cease to exist. Your bank needed an app. That made sense. Your favorite airline needed an app, okay? Useful for boarding passes. But then it was your grocery store, your local movie theater, your pharmacy, your pizza place, your coffee shop. Suddenly, the company that sold you a mattress one time was begging you, via email, to download the official mattress app for an enhanced sleep experience. The brand of light bulb you bought at the hardware store now had an app. Every single commercial entity on planet Earth suddenly believed its relationship with you was so important, so uniquely special, that it deserved its own dedicated icon on your phone, a sacred piece of digital real estate, right next to your photos of your family. And every single one of these apps, without exception, required an account. The entire nightmare of password fatigue we had just tried to solve with social logins was resurrected and multiplied by 1,000. Each app was its own little walled garden, its own data silo, demanding its own login credentials. The result was a digital hellscape of inefficiency. Our phones, these sleek, powerful devices, became cluttered with dozens of single-purpose apps that were, for the most part, just glorified bookmarks for a company's website. We were downloading a 50-megabyte piece of software just to order a burrito, a process that used to take 10 seconds in a browser. Why the frantic push? Why this obsessive need for an app? Because an app is a data gatherer's dream. It's a surveillance tool that a simple website could only ever fantasize about becoming. Cause: the explosion of smartphones and app stores created a persistent, direct channel for companies to reach customers 24/7, bypassing the limitations of the web browser. Effect: a manic gold rush ensued where every business, from global brands to corner stores, developed their own app, each one requiring a separate account and a long list of permissions. Consequence: our phones became digital landfills of single-use apps that served as permanent corporate outposts, granting these companies unprecedented access to our hardware, GPS location, push notifications, cameras, and microphones, and turning our personal devices into round-the-clock tracking tools. The real prize was the permission screen, that little pop-up that appears the first time you open an app. Allow coffee shop to access your location. Well, I needed to find the nearest store, so I guess, allow. And just like that, you've given your caffeine provider the ability to track your movements, not just when you're using the app, but potentially always, in the background. The most coveted prize of all was the push notification, the power to bypass your email inbox, bypass your browser, and directly buzz the device in your pocket at any time of day or night. It was a direct, intimate, and profoundly annoying line of communication that marketers had dreamed of for a century. Feeling sleepy? We've got a new espresso drink waiting for you. Send it to 30 p.m. just because their data shows that's when you're most vulnerable. This was the peak of corporate hubris. Mobile websites were deliberately made clunky and hard to use, all to display a giant banner at the top of the screen. For a better experience, download our app. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. They made the web experience worse to funnel you into their preferred data harvesting environment. And at the center of it all, as always, was the account. The app was just the sensor. The account was the brain. All the delicious new data, your daily commute patterns, the times you open the app. Your response to notifications was funneled directly back to your master profile, enriching it beyond their wildest dreams. The trap was no longer something you visited on your computer. It was now in your pocket, on your nightstand, with you, always. And it was about to break out of the screen entirely. The apocalypse had successfully turned our phones into the primary sensor network for our lives, tracking our movements, our communications, and our caffeine habits with terrifying precision. But even that wasn't intimate enough. The data ecosystem was still separated from our physical reality by a thin pane of glass. The next great leap for surveillance capitalism wasn't into a news screen, but into every physical object around the screen. The trap was about to break out of the digital world and get its hands on the doorknobs. This was the dawn of the Internet of Things, or IoT. The premise was both magnificently ambitious and deeply cursed. What if every dumb, inanimate object in your life, your coffee maker, your thermostat, your refrigerator, your toothbrush, was given a tiny computer brain and a Wi-Fi connection? What if your entire home became a single, interconnected, data harvesting organism for consumers? It was pitched as the frictionless future from the Jetsons. For the companies making these products, it was a desperate, once-in-a-century opportunity. Think about it from the perspective of a company that makes refrigerators for 100 years. Your business model was simple. You sold a person a big, cold box, and then you didn't hear from them again for 15 years. It was a stagnant, low-margin, boring business. But what if you could put a chip in that fridge suddenly? You're not a boring appliance manufacturer anymore. You're a tech company. You're a platform. You don't just sell a product. You provide an ongoing service. And what does every tech platform and every service need? That's right, an account. And so, the great smart device invasion began. Smart TVs, smart light bulbs, smart thermostats, smart doorbells, smart ovens, and yes, even smart toasters. And every single one of them came with a non-negotiable price of admission. You had to download their proprietary app and create an account just to unlock the features you had already paid for. The smartness of the device was held hostage. Your new $50 smart bulb worked exactly like a $1 dumb bulb until you connected it to your Wi-Fi, created a Philips Hue or a Wise account, and agreed to a 60-page end-user license agreement for a freaking light bulb. This was the new business model. Deliberately cripple the physical product and sell the missing features back to the customer in exchange for their data. The toaster has 15 advanced bread browning settings, but you can only access the best ones, like artisanal sourdough, through the app after you log in. Your smart TV has a beautiful 4K screen, but it refuses to connect to the internet until you sign up for a Samsung or LG account, which, by the way, gives them permission to monitor everything you watch. Let's follow the chain of this domestic invasion. Cause the cost of computer chips and Wi-Fi modules plummeted, allowing manufacturers of traditional, low-margin products like home appliances to desperately pivot into the more lucrative tech And data industry, effect, a tidal wave of smart devices flooded the market, with their core connectivity and advanced features locked behind a mandatory companion app and user account. Consequence, the data collection apparatus was extended deep into the most private spaces of our lives, our homes. Companies now had a direct, real-time feed of our domestic routines when we wake up, what's in our fridge when we're home or away, and our energy consumption habits, all linked back to our universal, email-based identity. The meta commentary here is just pure, unadulterated exasperation. We, as a society, collectively agreed that it was perfectly normal for a toaster to require a password, a device whose elegant singular purpose for the last century was to apply controlled heat to a slice of bread now needed to be onboarded onto our home Wi-Fi network, receive firmware updates, and have its own line item in our password manager. The justifications were laughably thin. Your smart fridge will know when you're out of milk, a problem previously solved by the revolutionary technology of opening the door. The reality of the smart home wasn't a seamless utopia. It was a chaotic mess of competing standards, buggy software, and devices that would brick themselves after a bad update, turning your $3,000 refrigerator into a very large, very cold paperweight. The smart TV is the perfect poster child for this whole mess. It's the ultimate living room spy. Buried in the settings is a feature called automatic content recognition, or ACR. It's on by default. It essentially takes a fingerprint of everything you watch, not just on Netflix, but from your cable box, your PlayStation, your Blu-ray player, and sends that data back to the manufacturer, who then sells it to data brokers and advertisers. The account you created was your signature on the consent form for this constant, invasive monitoring. We were now living in a world of maximum account saturation. We had accounts for websites, accounts for apps, and now accounts for the physical objects in our homes. The system was a tangled, insecure, and deeply annoying web with so many points of entry and so many tricks to get us to sign up. How did they keep us from rebelling? How did they make the whole process feel so inevitable? They got better at lying. They perfected the art of digital deception. We were now living in a state of digital siege. Our homes were saturated with smart devices demanding logins. Our phones were bloated with data-hungry apps, and our inboxes were overflowing with the consequences. The sheer scale of the account-based ecosystem had become a chaotic, tangled mess, and with this saturation came a new problem for the corporations: our resistance. We were getting tired. We were getting suspicious. We started to instinctively look for the no thanks button. So, faced with a user base that was slowly developing an immunity to their charms, the industry didn't back down. They just got better at lying. They perfected the art of digital deception. They didn't achieve this with better arguments or more compelling products. They did it with design. Welcome, my friends, to the wonderful, infuriating, and deeply unethical world of dark patterns. A dark pattern isn't just a poorly designed website. A poorly designed website is an accident, an act of incompetence. A dark pattern is the opposite. It is a user interface that has been meticulously, scientifically, and deliberately crafted to trick you into doing something you would not otherwise do. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's a premeditated crime against clarity. Once you know what to look for, you see these traps everywhere. They are the landmines of the modern internet. Let's take a tour through the Hall of Fame, or rather, the Hall of Shame. First, you have the master of passive aggression, confirm shaming. This is the pop-up that appears when you try to leave a site without signing up for their newsletter. The big, friendly button says, yes, I want awesome deals and a better life. But the link to decline, the one you actually want to click, is a tiny, gray hyperlink that says something like, no thanks. I enjoy being a clueless loser who pays full price. It's a psychological jab designed to make you feel stupid for protecting your own inbox. Then there's the classic Roach Motel, a design that makes it incredibly easy to get into a situation, but almost impossible to get out. The most famous example is the free trial. Signing up takes one click. They have your credit card info from your account, but when you want to cancel, you discover the cancel subscription button doesn't exist. You have to navigate a labyrinthine fact section, find a hidden phone number, call an understaffed support center between the hours of 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, and then verbally wrestle with a retention specialist whose entire job is to exhaust you into giving up. Of course, we have the old favorite, misleading visuals. This is the art of using color, size, and placement to guide your hand toward the button the company wants you to press. The Create Account button is a giant, glowing beacon of joy and efficiency. The Continue as Guest option is a sad, anemic little link that looks like it's already been clicked and disabled, hiding in the footer next to the copyright notice. Your brain is hardwired to follow the bright, easy path, and they exploit that without a moment's hesitation. And let's not forget the brute force method. Forced action. This is where they simply hold the content hostage. You click a link to read an interesting article, and a giant overlay descends, blocking the entire page. To continue reading, please sign up for our free account. There is no way around it. Your choice is to either surrender your email or close the tab. Consent, in this scenario, is a joke. It's coercion, plain and simple. This isn't just guesswork. This is a science. Cause, as users became more savvy and automatically resistant to signing up for everything, companies needed more subtle and powerful methods to maintain their high conversion rates for data collection. Effect, the entire field of user experience UX design was weaponized. A/B testing, a method of showing different versions of a page to different users, was employed not to find the most helpful design, but to find the most ruthlessly effective one for the business's goals. Consequence, the concept of informed consent was rendered meaningless. Users were systematically guided, shamed, and tricked into making choices against their own best interests, creating a deeply cynical and exhausting online environment where every click is a potential trap. The meta commentary here is about the profound ethical decay this represents. The job of a UX designer was, in theory, to be the advocate for the user inside the company, to build things that were intuitive and respectful. Dark patterns turn them into con artists. The interface, which should be a neutral bridge between you and a service, became an adversary. It was designed to exploit your cognitive biases, your impatience, and your desire to just get things done. It was a constant, low-grade battle of wits where the house had rigged all the games. This relentless assault of deceptive design, combined with the sheer number of accounts we now managed, created an environment of pure chaos. We were fighting a multi-front war against manipulative pop-ups and our own terrible memories for passwords. The entire system was buckling under its own weight, and from this chaos, a new solution arose. One that promised to help us manage the mess, but in doing so, created a whole new kind of vulnerability. The war of attrition against our attention and our privacy was in full swing. We were navigating a minefield of dark patterns, managing a chaotic portfolio of smart toasters and single-purpose apps. And we were losing, but the most immediate and pressing failure was happening inside our own heads. The human brain, a magnificent organ designed to recognize patterns, process language, and appreciate a good sunset, officially threw in the towel. It capitulated. It was never designed to be a secure, encrypted Rolodex for 300 different variations of fluffy 1 to 3. The sheer cognitive load of the account economy had broken us. Our response was predictable and deeply insecure. We reused passwords. We all did it. We had our bank password, our social media password, and our junky website password. It was the only way to stay sane, but this created a terrifying domino effect. A breach at some forgotten online forum where you signed up once in 2009 could now expose the password you also used for your email, which was the key to resetting every other password in your life. The entire system was a house of cards built on the foundation of our own limited memory. From the ashes of this security nightmare, a hero emerged. A logical, responsible, and technically elegant solution, the password manager. These applications, from providers like LastPass, 1Password, or Dashlane, came with a simple, seductive promise: you don't have to remember anything ever again. Except for one thing, the pitch was irresistible. The app would generate a completely random, 24-character, unguessable gibberish password for every single account you created. $9 QR and 7 *PP to FIVN for BJ *M. It would then save that password in a heavily encrypted digital vault. All you had to do was create and remember one single, ultra-strong master password to unlock the vault. It felt like freedom. It felt like we had finally outsmarted the system. Gone was the mental strain. Gone was the guilt of password reuse. A beautiful sense of order and security descended upon our chaotic digital lives. With a single click, we could log into any of our hundreds of accounts, each secured with a password that would take a supercomputer a billion years to crack. We had finally won the arms race against the account economy, or so we thought. Because in our rush to solve the problem of 1,000 tiny vulnerabilities, we had created a new one, a single, colossal, terrifying vulnerability. You have taken every key to every door in your digital life: your bank account, your email, your company's network, your private photos, your entire identity, and you have put them all on one key ring. You've placed that key ring in a vault made by a third-party company. and you've locked it with one single key. This is not a bug in the password manager model, it is the fundamental premise. It is an all-or-nothing bet on that company's security and your ability to protect that one master password. Let's trace the logic of this terrifying consolidation. Cause, the human brain is biologically incapable of creating and remembering hundreds of unique, complex passwords, forcing users into the insecure practice of password reuse. Effect, password manager apps soared in popularity, providing a centralized, encrypted vault to store all of a user's credentials, accessible via a single master password. Consequence, while drastically improving the security of individual accounts, this model consolidated a user's entire digital life into a single point of failure, turning the password manager companies themselves into the most valuable and sought-after targets for hackers on the planet. We didn't solve the problem of complexity. We just moved it, amplified it, and gave it a brand name, the low-grade anxiety of forgetting your pizza place. Password was now replaced by the heart-stopping existential dread of forgetting your master password, an act that would be the digital equivalent of locking yourself out of your own life permanently. Worse yet was the risk of it being stolen. The password manager companies became the Fort Knox of the internet, and every sophisticated hacking group in the world knew that a successful breach wouldn't just yield a few credit card numbers. It would yield the master keys to the digital kingdoms of millions of people, and then the inevitable happened. This theoretical risk became a horrifying reality. In 2022, LastPass, one of the biggest password managers in the world, suffered a catastrophic breach. It wasn't a simple smash and grab. Hackers methodically breached their systems, stole a copy of their customer vault data, and then used that information to launch another attack against a senior employee to get the decryption keys. The fallout was immense. The one company we trusted to be the expert, the one place that was supposed to be impregnable, had been compromised. The single point of failure had failed. The guillotine had fallen. Our beautifully elegant solution had revealed its fatal flaw. The system was more fragile than we ever imagined. And if the companies whose entire business model was security couldn't protect our data, what hope did anyone else have? What was happening to all the data held by the hundreds of other companies that only saw security as a pesky line item on their budget? The floodgates were about to open. The catastrophic failure of a major password manager was the canary in the coal mine. It was the proof of concept for a terrifying new reality. If the companies whose entire existence was predicated on cybersecurity couldn't protect our data, what chance did a mid-sized online retailer of artisanal dog treats have? The answer was zero. They had zero chance, and so, the floodgates didn't just open. They were ripped from their hinges and blasted into orbit. The inevitable breach tsunami had arrived. It didn't come as a single, cataclysmic wave. It came as a relentless, never-ending tide of failure. 1,000 smaller breaches from 1,000 different companies, all crashing down on our digital lives, day after day, year after year. Every single company that had spent the last decade begging, cajoling, and tricking us into creating an account was now revealed to be sitting on a digital powder keg with the security protocols of a wet paper bag. They were magnificent at data collection, but it turned out they were utterly, almost comically, incompetent at data protection. This incompetence gave birth to a cynical, predictable, and almost ritualistic cycle, the data breach life cycle. It has 4 distinct stages. Stage 1. The hack. It happens in the dead of night. A hacker in a remote country finds a vulnerability that has been unpatched for 6 months and quietly exfiltrates the entire customer database. The company, busy optimizing its marketing funnels, notices nothing. Stage 2. The discovery. Weeks, or more often, months later, a security journalist or a white hat researcher discovers the stolen data for sale on a dark web forum for about the price of a used car. They contact the company, who issues a stern no comment while their legal team runs around with their hair on fire. Stage 3. The reluctant admission. Once the story is about to break, the company is finally forced to come clean. This is where we, the victims, officially enter the picture. Via a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, the breach notification email. Stage 4. The email. The email. It is a work of art, a haiku of non-apology, carefully crafted by a team of lawyers to admit the absolute minimum amount of liability. It always follows the same template. It begins with a calm, reassuring subject line like an important update regarding your account. Not "we have failed you and your identity is now for sale." No, just a gentle update. The email's body is even better. "We are writing to inform you of a recent security incident," which is the corporate-approved way of saying, "we got caught." It continues. "That may have involved some of your data. which translates to, it definitely involved all of your data, and probably your mother's maiden name, too. Then comes the most audacious, most insulting line in the entire history of corporate communications: we take your privacy and security very seriously. This is a sentence so devoid of meaning, so diametrically opposed to the reality of the situation, that it borders on avant-garde comedy. The email concludes by placing the burden squarely back on you. We recommend you immediately change your password. And finally, the piece de resistance. As a courtesy, we are offering 1 year of free credit monitoring. This is the corporate equivalent of giving someone a bucket after you've set their house on fire. It is a reactive service that alerts you after a thief has already opened 3 credit cards in your name. It is a legally mandated coupon for a consolation prize. Let's follow the disastrous logic. Cause hundreds of companies whose expertise was in retail or manufacturing were now storing millions of sensitive user accounts with completely inadequate security, making them irresistible soft targets. Effect: a relentless tsunami of data breaches began, with hackers systematically stealing user credentials, credit card numbers, and personal information on a global scale. Consequence: the promise of data security was revealed as a total fiction. Our personal information was now permanently exposed on the dark web, fueling a massive global industry of identity theft and financial fraud, and leaving the public in a state of cynical resignation. Yahoo lost 3 billion accounts. Adobe lost 150 million. Equifax, a credit reporting agency whose literal job was to handle sensitive data, lost the social security numbers of 147 million people. Target, Home Depot, Marriott, the list is endless, and the consequences for these companies: a temporary stock dip, a fine that amounts to a rounding error on their quarterly earnings. The CEO might resign with a golden parachute, but for the individual, the consequences could last for years. The system had no accountability. We were trapped. We were forced to hand over our data to get service, and the people we handed it to were incapable of protecting it. The entire foundation of the account economy was built on a promise of security that was, at best, a well-intentioned fantasy, and at worst, a deliberate lie. The system was broken. It was on fire. Surely, someone had to step in and do something, right? Surely, a government would try to regulate this chaos, right? The system was on fire. Our data was being stolen on a weekly basis from companies who had promised to protect it, and the only compensation we received was a worthless coupon for credit monitoring. The digital world was a lawless frontier of corporate negligence and rampant identity theft. The public was angry, frustrated, and deeply paranoid. Surely, someone had to intervene. A government, a regulator, someone had to step in and try to tame this wild beast. And from across the Atlantic, a hero rode in, clad in the shining armor of dense, multi-layered bureaucratic regulation. Its name was GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. It sounded powerful, it sounded official, it sounded like the cavalry arriving at the last possible second. For years, the European Union had been watching this chaotic mess unfold, and on May 25, 2018, they dropped a rule book the size of a phone book on the entire digital economy, not just in Europe, but for any company anywhere in the world that did business with European citizens. The principles behind GDPR were genuinely, shockingly, pro-consumer. It was a legislative work of art, a beautiful dream of digital self-determination in theory. It gave you, the individual, a set of superpowers. It gave you the right to explicit consent. Companies couldn't just trick you into giving up data with pre-checked boxes anymore. They had to get your clear, unambiguous permission. It gave you the right of access. You could now file a request and demand a company show you the creepy, detailed file it had been keeping on you. And most powerfully, it gave you the right to erasure, the legendary right to be forgotten. In theory, you could tell a company to take your entire data profile and digitally incinerate it. The law was backed by terrifyingly large fines, up to 4% of a company's global annual revenue. This was David's slingshot, loaded with a financial nuke, aimed squarely at the head of Goliath. It was a beautiful, heroic idea, and it failed, not because the principles were wrong, but because it catastrophically underestimated the relentless, profit-driven ingenuity of corporate malicious compliance. The months leading up to the GDPR deadline were a flurry of corporate panic. Not a panic of, oh my god, we need to fundamentally rethink our entire business model of rampant surveillance. No, it was a panic of, oh my god, our lawyers say we need to cover our butts immediately. And so began the great privacy policy update apocalypse. Our inboxes were flooded with thousands of emails, all with the same subject line: we've updated our privacy policy. This was not a good faith effort to inform us. This was a global, synchronized, legally mandated spam campaign designed to create a paper trail of compliance. Then came the most visible, most infuriating, and most self-defeating consequence of this noble law, the plague of the cookie banner. To comply with the explicit consent rule, every single website on Earth suddenly had to ask your permission to track you. And how did they do it? By applying the exact same dark patterns we already knew and hated. Before you could read a single word of an article, a massive banner would slide up, blocking the content. It always had two options. Option 1, a giant, friendly, brightly colored button that said accept all. Option 2, a small, gray, complicated-looking button that said manage preferences. If you dared to click that second button, you were transported to a nightmare screen with 200 different toggles, all set to on, with confusing, jargon-filled descriptions. Let's break down this tragicomedy, cause in a heroic attempt to restore digital privacy. The European Union passed GDPR, a powerful and sweeping regulation to give citizens meaningful control over their personal data. Effect, companies responded not by changing their data hoarding practices, but by deploying a user-hostile layer of compliance, chiefly in the form of cookie banners and privacy pop-ups. Designed with dark patterns, consequence, this created a global epidemic of banner fatigue. Faced with a constant barrage of these annoying, confusing choices, users overwhelmingly defaulted to clicking the accept all button, which paradoxically provided companies with more explicit, legally sound consent to track them than they ever had before. The meta commentary is heartbreaking. A law designed to foster thoughtful, informed consent was reduced to a mindless, infuriating click-through exercise. Europe built a beautiful, intricate lock to protect our data, and Silicon Valley's UX designers, the very artists of deception, immediately figured out how to get us to hand over the key. Every single time, with a single, exhausted, resentful click. The spirit of the law was dead on arrival. GDPR didn't fix the problem, it just made the problem more annoying. It created a thin veneer of legality and consent over the exact same system of surveillance. The data collection continued, unabated. The tracking continued. The profiling continued. It just now had a pop-up in front of it. So if the most powerful, comprehensive data regulation in history couldn't stop the machine, what was left? If the law was a failure, the rebellion would have to come from the users themselves. It was time for guerrilla warfare. The law, for all its noble intentions, had turned out to be a paper tiger, tangled in its own red tape and outmaneuvered by corporate cunning. The tsunami of data breaches continued. The plague of cookie banners made the internet worse. The system was still broken. So if salvation wasn't coming from the regulators, if the cavalry wasn't coming, then the resistance would have to be scrappier. It would have to be a decentralized, grassroots, guerrilla war fought by individual users. And it began with a simple, elegant, and profoundly beautiful act of digital sabotage, the burner email. The concept was brilliant. The account economy had made our email address the key to our identity, our permanent digital passport. The burner email movement simply asked, what if you could use a fake passport? What if you could become a ghost? Services with names like 10-minute mail or temp mail began to pop up, and their function was pure, minimalist genius. You would visit their website, and it would instantly generate a completely random, temporary email address for you, K9Z_random_waffle@temphost.net. This address wasn't permanent, it was an illusion. It was designed to live for 10 minutes, an hour, maybe a day, and then simply vanish. It was a digital mayfly, born to receive one email and then cease to exist. Suddenly, the user had a counter-weapon. You'd land on a website selling, say, a single coffee mug. To complete the purchase, they hit you with the dreaded pop-up, sign up for our newsletter and get 15% OFF. You, the savvy rebel, wanted the discount, but you absolutely did not want a lifelong relationship with the coffee mug company. You did not want to join their family. So you'd open a new tab, generate a burner email, and paste it into their sign-up box. A second later, the coupon code would arrive in your temporary inbox. You'd copy the code, apply it to your order, and then close the burner email tab forever. Poof. You were gone. You became a ghost in their machine, a digital phantom who took the discount and left nothing but a dead-end address and a puff of smoke. It was a small act, but it was a declaration of war. It was a direct assault on the fundamental premise of the data economy. The companies wanted a permanent hook into your life. The burner email gave them a hook made of ice, designed to melt the second they looked away. It was a beautiful, cynical, and highly effective act of defiance. Let's trace the arc of this insurgency. Cause, exhausted by the endless demand for their real email addresses and the resulting spam, and tracking a growing cohort of tech-literate users, sought a way to satisfy the sign-up requirement without any of the long-term consequences. Effect: the use of disposable burner email services exploded. These tools allowed users to generate a temporary, functional inbox on the fly, use it to get a confirmation link or a discount, and then abandon it forever. Consequence: this act of guerrilla privacy created a low-level insurgency against the data economy. It poisoned the well. The company's database would swell with thousands of useless, dead-end email addresses, making their marketing list less valuable and severing the link between a purchase and a person's real, trackable identity, of course. The corporations fought back. This was an arms race. They started subscribing to services that maintained massive blacklists of known disposable email domains. You'd try to sign up with a burner, and a smarmy red error message would appear. Please enter a valid email address. So the burner services would generate new, more obscure domains. The companies would block those. It was a constant game of cat and mouse, fought in the sign-up boxes of a million different websites. This rebellion wasn't limited to full-on burners. Even mainstream email providers offered tools for the fight. Gmail, for instance, allows you to use plus aliases. You could sign up for the pizza place using the address mynamepluspizza@gmail.com. The email still comes to your regular inbox, but if you suddenly start getting spam from a data broker sent to that exact address, you have irrefutable proof of who sold your information. It was a way to plant a digital tracer on your own data. The meta commentary here is about the complete and utter breakdown of trust. The rise of the burner email proves that a significant portion of the population never for a second believed the corporate marketing nonsense. They knew they weren't joining a community. They knew the relationship was purely transactional. The burner email was an acknowledgement of that truth. It was users saying, "I see your system, I understand its rules, and I am now going to cynically exploit it for my own benefit, just as you are doing to me." This was progress of a sort. It was a sign of life, but it was still a fringe movement. For every person using a burner email, there were 100 others still handing over their primary address. The data economy was wounded, but it was far from defeated. Faced with this growing skepticism and these new guerrilla tactics, the industry knew it couldn't just keep playing whack-a-mole. It needed a new story, a new, more sophisticated, more emotionally resonant justification for its endless hunger for our data. It needed to gaslight US. The guerrilla war was on. The burner email rebellion and the rise of ad blockers were clear signs that a growing minority of users were no longer buying the flimsy excuses for the account economy. The industry, for the first time, was on the back foot. They couldn't win the arms race with technology alone. Blacklisting burner domains was a losing game of whack-a-mole. They had to win the war for hearts and minds. They needed a new narrative, a new, beautiful, and utterly deceptive word to justify their insatiable hunger for our data. The old excuse, convenience, was dead. It was cold. It was transactional. It reminded people of the raw, naked value exchange. They needed something warmer, something that sounded like a favor, something that felt bespoke and aspirational. And so, from the misty peaks of 1,000 corporate marketing retreats, the word descended upon us. Not convenience, not efficiency, personalization. This was the ultimate gaslight. It was a complete reframing of the surveillance apparatus, a linguistic coup d'etat of breathtaking audacity. The pitch, which we all absorbed through osmosis. When something like this, "We're not tracking you, we're getting to know you, we're not collecting your data to sell it, we're using it to understand your unique personality, your passions, your dreams. We're doing all this hard work so we can clear away the noisy, irrelevant clutter of the internet and create a serene, beautiful, curated experience just for you." It was brilliant. It was genius. It transformed the act of corporate spying from a creepy, invasive process into a high-end, artisanal service. Suddenly, the ads for toilet paper weren't just ads. They were personalized content solutions for your unique household needs. The banner ad for a new brand of ketchup was a curated suggestion for your culinary journey. Your entire consumer life was being reframed as a delicate work of art, and the algorithm was your loving, devoted curator, working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure you only ever saw things that would bring you joy. You weren't a target anymore. You were the subject of a portrait. The whole thing was a magnificent lie, of course. The reality was the same as it ever was. They were building a psychological model of your weaknesses, your insecurities, and your impulsive behaviors so they could show you an ad for a product at the exact moment you were most emotionally vulnerable and likely to click buy. But personalization sounded so much better than behavioral manipulation. to sell this fantasy. The industry held up its showcase examples. Think of Spotify's Discover Weekly playlist, which really is an amazing piece of personalization, or Netflix's recommendation engine, which genuinely helps you find your next binge watch. They would point to these genuinely useful, beloved services and say, "See, this is what personalization is. This is what we want to do for you everywhere." They use the good to sell the bad. They use the magic of a great music recommendation to justify the creepy reality of an ad. For fertility treatments following you around the internet, because you once Googled a question about a friend's baby shower, let's follow the logic of this grand deception. Cause as public cynicism about data collection grew, the old justification of simple convenience was no longer persuasive enough to ensure continued, willing participation in the system. Effect, the entire tech and marketing industry pivoted its public-facing language to the aspirational concept of personalization, framing constant surveillance as a necessary prerequisite for a curated and relevant user experience. Consequence, this narrative successfully gaslight the public, reframing privacy as a self-imposed handicap. Opting out meant choosing a generic, boring, and inferior experience, turning the act of sharing your entire life story with a corporation from a concession into a status symbol. The sheer arrogance of it is what really gets you. The idea that an algorithm whose entire knowledge of you is based on a handful of panicked clicks and a pizza order from 2018 now has the audacity to act like it's your best friend, your confidant, your personal life coach. It presumes to know you better than you know yourself, and it subtly shames you for wanting privacy. Oh, you don't want a personalized experience. You want the irrelevant ads, the ones for losers. Okay, weirdo. Suit yourself. This new narrative was lethally effective because it was so hard to argue against. Who wants an irrelevant internet? Who wants to be shown things they don't care about? By framing the debate in these terms, they made the endless collection of our data seem not only benign, but actively desirable. A noble quest to make our digital lives better. The gaslight was working. The industry had found the perfect story to justify the status quo. Now, all they had to do was find a way to punish the people who still refused to believe it. The great gaslight of personalization had successfully convinced the willing converts. And the easily confused, the idea of a curated experience was a beautiful, soothing story that helped justify the constant, low-grade hum of surveillance in our lives. But what about the stubborn? What about the rebels, the privacy advocates, and the deeply skeptical who were still using burner emails and still refusing to join the family? For them, the industry had a much simpler, much blunter, and far more honest tool. It wasn't a story, it was a threat. It was called blackmail. And the weapon of choice in this new, more aggressive phase of the war was the single most hated part of e-commerce, the shipping fee. For a brief, shining moment, shipping was just shipping. It was a boring, logistical cost you paid to get a physical object from a warehouse to your house. Then, free shipping appeared as a rare, delightful promotion, a holiday special, a limited time offer. We loved it, it felt like a gift. And then, corporations did what they always do. They took something we loved and turned it into a weapon against us. The free shipping blackmail scheme is a masterpiece of economic coercion. It works like this. You, a proud holdout, have successfully navigated the dark patterns and resisted the personalization narrative. You've found a $20 t-shirt you want to buy, and you've made it all the way to the final checkout page as a guest. You enter your address and payment info, then you look at the final invoice. Item total, $20. Tax, $1.50. And then the gut punch. Shipping and handling, $8.99. Suddenly your $20 t-shirt costs $30. It feels outrageous. It feels like a scam. But then your eye is drawn to a little box right next to the exorbitant shipping fee. It's a box glowing with promise, radiating pure value. It says in big, friendly letters, create a free account and get free shipping on this order and all future orders. The choice is laid bare. It's an ultimatum. You can either pay an immediate punitive and deeply annoying $8.99 tax for the privilege of maintaining your privacy, or you can surrender your email address, create yet another password, and agree to a lifetime of marketing emails. That's the deal. Your wallet is now in a direct, zero-sum conflict with your principles. And 99 times out of 100, the wallet is going to win. This is the moment the velvet glove comes off. Cause, despite the sophisticated personalization narrative, a stubborn segment of the consumer population continued to resist creating accounts, threatening the universal data collection model. Effect, retailers shifted from a strategy of persuasion to one of financial coercion. They weaponized shipping fees, making them prohibitively expensive for guest checkouts while framing free shipping as an exclusive must-have benefit for account-holding members. Consequence: this masterfully turned account creation from a matter of preference into an act of pure economic rationality. The user was now faced with a clear privacy tax, effectively forcing the last holdouts to capitulate and join the data ecosystem to avoid being financially penalized. This isn't an incentive anymore. A 10% coupon is an incentive. This is a punishment. They have artificially inflated the cost of the guest option to make the account option, the one they want you to choose, look not just better, but like the only sane choice. It's a false choice, engineered to produce one outcome. The positive framing is the most insulting part. They don't say, pay an $8.99 fee for being a guest. They say, get free shipping by joining our club. It's a threat disguised as a gift, a penalty presented as a perk, and no one has perfected this model more ruthlessly than Amazon. Amazon Prime is the free shipping blackmail elevated to a global religion. They took the basic concept and supercharged it with a $139 annual subscription fee. You pay them a hefty tribute once a year for the privilege of getting the free, fast shipping that our brains have now been conditioned to see as a fundamental right. This fee then creates a powerful psychological trap known as the sunk cost fallacy. You've already paid the fee, so now you feel a deep, primal need to get your money's worth. This means every conceivable purchase, from batteries to books to bananas, now has to go through Amazon, because anywhere else you'd have to pay for shipping. They didn't just blackmail you into an account, they blackmailed you into total, monogamous, ecosystem-wide loyalty. This was the final, brutal phase of customer acquisition. All the flowery talk about community, family, and curated experiences was revealed for the hollow marketing nonsense it always was. The industry's message was now brutally clear. We will get your data. We will get it by charming you. We will get it by tricking you. Or, if all else fails, we will simply charge you a fee until you give up. The war was over. They had won. We were all members now. We were all permanent residents of their digital nations. And the walls were about to get a whole lot higher. The blackmail was brutally effective. The war for our email addresses was, for all intents and purposes, over. We had surrendered under the combined assault of convenience, dark patterns, personalization, and punitive shipping fees. The global consumer base had finally capitulated. We were all members now, ticket holders, account havers. But now that the corporations had successfully herded the entire population into their digital pens, a new and far more ambitious strategic objective emerged, building the fences so high that we could never, ever leave. Welcome to the age of the Great Walled Gardens. The business model was no longer just about getting you to create an account with a single store. The new goal was to make that account the passport to an entire, exclusive, and proprietary country. A digital nation-state with its own rules, its own currency, and its own closed borders. The goal shifted from customer acquisition to customer imprisonment, or, to use the friendly marketing term, ecosystem retention. The strategy was perfected by the tech giants, who realized that the real, lasting power wasn't in selling one product, but in selling a whole, interconnected suite of products that only worked perfectly with each other. It was a bait and switch of historic proportions. The original promise of the internet was openness, universal standards, and interoperability. You could use any browser to visit any website, use any email client to talk to any email server. The walled garden was the exact opposite. It was a deliberate, calculated return to the proprietary, closed-off systems of the 1980s, but this time, the walls were built with beautiful, seamless convenience. The undisputed master architect of the modern walled garden is, of course, Apple. Their ecosystem is a technological marvel, a paradise of user-friendly design. It's the lore. Your iPhone syncs flawlessly with your MacBook. Your photos from your phone magically appear on your laptop. A text message that arrives on your phone can be answered on your watch. Your AirPods connect instantly. It's a beautiful, frictionless, and deeply seductive experience. It just works, and that is the bait. The walls of this beautiful garden are invisible, but they are made of steel. The most famous example is a message within the Apple ecosystem. Your messages are a tranquil, happy blue. They work perfectly with read receipts, typing indicators, and high-quality photo sharing. But the second you try to send a message to someone outside the garden, an Android user, the wall appears. Their messages turn a sickly, low-status green. Photos become pixelated. Group chats break. It's a deliberately degraded experience designed to create social pressure to stay within the walls. Being the green bubble in a chat is a subtle form of digital ostracism, and the walls are everywhere. The hundreds of dollars you've spent on apps in the App Store, they are tied to your Apple ID. If you switch to an Android phone, that money is gone. You have to buy them all again. The music and movies you purchase from iTunes, tied to your Apple ID. Your perfectly organized cloud library of a decade's worth of family photos. Exporting it is a technical nightmare. Let's break down the architecture of the trap. Cause with user acquisition. Largely complete, the primary business goal of tech giants shifted to customer retention and maximizing lifetime value, making user churn the #1 enemy. Effect, these companies began to intentionally engineer their products to be incompatible with rival platforms while building a seamless, vertically integrated ecosystem of hardware and software, all linked by a single, mandatory user account. Consequence, this created astronomical switching costs. The financial, logistical, and social pain of leaving the ecosystem became so high that it effectively locked users into a single company's world, ensuring a captive audience for all future products, services, and subscriptions. This isn't just an Apple phenomenon, this is the playbook. Google has its own garden, a slightly more open one, but a garden nonetheless built around the gravitational pull of your Google account, linking search, Gmail, Drive, Photos, and Android. Amazon built its garden around commerce, with your Amazon account as the key that unlocks Prime, Alexa, Kindle, Audible, and Whole Foods. You don't just buy a product from these companies anymore, you swear fealty to a flag, you pick a team. The meta commentary here is a eulogy for the lost dream of the open web. We were promised a decentralized world of freedom and choice. What we got was digital feudalism. We now live in one of a handful of powerful, competing kingdoms, and our data, our media, and our social connections are largely confined within the borders of the kingdom we chose. Leaving is not just inconvenient, it's an act of digital defection, a form of self-imposed exile. We were locked in, we had chosen our flags, and the cost of changing our allegiance was just too high. The companies had us right where they wanted us, registered, loyal, and contained. But could the system be even more consolidated? What if the key to your chosen kingdom could also become the master key for everywhere else? The illusion of choice was about to get a whole lot more convincing. The great walled gardens had been built, the borders were closed, and the populations were locked in. The kings of these new digital nations, Apple, Google, Amazon, reigned supreme over their captive audiences, but they were not satisfied with mere loyalty. They dreamed of total, absolute dependency. They didn't just want their platform to be your digital home. They wanted their platform's ID card to be your only valid form of identification, no matter where you traveled across the entire web. This ambition was disguised as the solution to our biggest remaining problem, the single sign-on dream. For years, we had all fantasized about it. The holy grail of identity management, one account, one password, a single, secure, universal key that would unlock every door on the internet. It was the logical conclusion of the convenience narrative, a utopian vision that promised to end the nightmare of password fatigue and security risks. Forever, no more password managers, no more forgotten credentials, just one login to rule them all. And in a twisted, cynical way, we got it, but the dream didn't arrive as an open, universal standard built by a benevolent consortium for the good of humanity. The dream was co-opted. It was implemented as a proprietary feature by the very kings of the walled gardens who had the most to gain from centralizing power. The universal login became a new battlefield, with banners that read "Sign in with Google," "Sign in with Facebook," and most strategically, "Sign in with Apple." The grand illusion was that this was for us. In reality, it was the final, brilliant move to make their platforms indispensable. Every time you used "Sign in with Google" to create an account with a new third-party service, your newspaper subscription, your food delivery app, your online chess club, you weren't just saving yourself 30 seconds, you were wrapping another tendril of your digital life around the central pillar of your Google identity. You were deepening your dependency. You were giving Google a silent, irrefutable notification that you, their user, were now also a user of this other service, providing them with yet another brushstroke for their grand portrait of your life. This was the ultimate power play. The platform giants became the de facto passport authorities for the entire internet. Apple's entry into this game was particularly masterful. They came late, but they came with a knife. Their Sign In with Apple button was launched with a killer feature, a direct strategic assault on their rivals, Hide My Email. This allowed you to create an account with a third-party service using a randomly generated, disposable email address that forwarded to your real one. It was a masterclass in marketing. Apple weaponized the very privacy concerns created by its competitors. to position itself as the safe choice, the trustworthy gatekeeper. But the end result was the same, making the Apple ID an even more essential, more foundational, and more inescapable part of your digital life. Let's follow the chain of this glorious illusion. Cause, the overwhelming complexity and security risks of managing hundreds of individual accounts created a massive demand for a simplified, universal login system. Effect, the dominant tech platforms leveraged the ubiquity of their accounts to offer their own proprietary single sign-on SSO solutions, positioning themselves as the central identity brokers for the web. Consequence, this radically centralized the internet's identity layer, making a user has access to hundreds of independent services, entirely dependent on their good standing with a single mega corporation, creating the ultimate form of ecosystem lock-in and a catastrophic single point of failure. The meta commentary here is one of pure existential dread. We have willingly, in the name of convenience, built a system where losing access to a single account, your Google account, your Apple ID, is no longer a minor inconvenience, it is digital death. Imagine getting locked out of your Google account for some perceived violation of their terms of service. You don't just lose access to your email and photos. You potentially lose access to your smart thermostat, your news subscriptions, your work documents, your video doorbell, and every other service where you click that convenient little button. You become a digital ghost, locked out of your own life, with no effective court of appeals. The beautiful, chaotic, decentralized promise of the early internet was now a distant memory. We had traded it for a clean, well-lit, and heavily monitored corporate panopticon, where our very existence was contingent on the whims of one of three or four corporate landlords. We were registered, we were authenticated, we were trapped, and our accounts weren't just for logging in anymore, they were for buying things. Digital things, e-books, movies, music, software. But in this new, account-based world, what did buying something actually mean? Did we own anything at all? Our digital lives were now fully consolidated, authenticated by a handful of mega accounts and locked within the beautiful, impenetrable walls of their gardens. We had accepted this new reality. This was the price of admission to the modern world. But what about the stuff? The digital goods we spent our very real, hard-earned money on. The movies, the music, the e-books, the software, the video games. Surely, after clicking the Buy Now button and seeing the money leave our bank account, we own that. Right, wrong, so profoundly wrong. Meet the silent, spectral ghost in our machine, the digital hall monitor, the invisible electric fence built around your entire media library. Its name is Digital Rights Management, or DRM, and its sole purpose in life is to enforce the single greatest lie of the digital age, the illusion of ownership. When you bought a physical book or a CD, the transaction was simple. You exchanged money for a physical object. That object was now your property. You could read it, play it, lend it to a friend, sell it to a used record store, or use it as a coaster for your drink. You owned it. This legal principle is called the first sale doctrine, and it's the foundation of ownership for physical goods. In the digital world, that entire concept was taken out back and quietly, methodically erased from existence. When you click that beautiful, tempting by now for $12.99 button on a new book for your Kindle or a movie on Apple TV, you are not, in any legal or practical sense of the word, buying anything. You are entering into a long-term, revocable, and deeply one-sided rental agreement. You are purchasing a license, a fragile, conditional permission slip to access that media through your mandatory account on a limited number of company-approved devices for as long as the company exists and feels like honoring the agreement. And what is the chain that binds you to this agreement? What is the enforcement mechanism? It's the account. The same account you were forced to create, the one tied to your credit card, your identity, your entire digital life. The DRM is the lock on the door to your library, and your account is the only key. If you ever lose that key, if your account gets banned for a perceived terms of service violation, if the company goes out of business, if you simply forget the password to the kingdom, then all the property you spent thousands of dollars acquiring vanishes in a puff of digital smoke. It's all gone. Your library is empty. You have no recourse. Let's follow the cold, hard logic of this swindle. Cause, the entertainment and software industries, paralyzed by an existential fear of digital piracy, demanded a way to control how their products were used after they were sold. Effect, they, in partnership with the tech platforms, implemented strict, account-based DRM systems that tethered every digital file to a single user's identity, effectively making the media impossible to copy, lend, or resell. Consequence, the fundamental right of ownership was systematically dismantled for an entire category of goods. Consumers were unknowingly and repeatedly paying the full price of a product in exchange for a temporary, non-transferable rental license, controlled entirely by a corporate gatekeeper. The most perfect, most painfully ironic illustration of this reality happened in 2009. Amazon, without warning and without permission, reached into the personal Kindle devices of its customers and remotely deleted the books of George Orwell's 1984 in Animal Farm that they had legally purchased. The reason? A third-party seller had uploaded them without having the proper rights, but the lesson was terrifyingly clear. In the most Orwellian event in the history of digital commerce, Amazon demonstrated that they have the power to make the books on your virtual bookshelf simply disappear. You cannot make this stuff up. The meta commentary here is about the profound dishonesty at the heart of digital commerce. The entire industry, from Apple to Amazon to Google to Valve, conspired to keep the comfortable, familiar, and legally potent word buy, while secretly changing its definition to mean rent indefinitely at our sole discretion. The buy now button is, without exaggeration, the single biggest and most successful lie on the entire internet. It's a linguistic trick, a legal sleight of hand performed millions of times a day, that has robbed us of the very concept of a personal, permanent library. So we exist in these walled gardens as renters, not owners. Our identities are leased, our media is licensed, and our continued access is entirely dependent on our good behavior and the continued existence of our corporate landlords. This entire, sprawling, fragile ecosystem of accounts, data, and licenses has become the foundation of the modern economy. But what is it all worth? What is the invisible engine that all of this is feeding? We were now digital tenants living in corporate kingdoms. Our identities leased from tech giants and our media libraries rented on a conditional basis. We had been registered, authenticated, and locked inside a system of breathtaking scale and complexity. But why? What was the ultimate purpose of this elaborate, globe-spanning apparatus of control? The answer isn't just to sell you more stuff. That's thinking too small. The real engine driving this entire Rube Goldberg machine of accounts and data is the largest, fastest, and least understood market the world has ever seen. It's a market where the commodity isn't gold or oil. The commodity is us. Specifically, predictions about what we are going to do next. Welcome to the data economy. Trillions of dollars are now flowing through a vast, invisible architecture built entirely on the back of that pizza order account you made in 2012. To understand this, you have to realize that advertising has fundamentally changed. The old model was about selling access to a demographic, a television network would tell a car company, "We can sell you a 30-second spot during the football game." And a lot of men aged 25 to 54 will probably see it. It was a game of educated guesses and statistical averages. That world is dead. The new world, the world that every single one of our accounts was built to fuel, is not about demographics. It's about individuals. A company doesn't buy an ad hoping you'll see it. They buy an ad that is guaranteed to be placed directly in front of you, Jane Doe, age 34, at 8:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, because an algorithm has calculated a 70 to 0.8% probability that you are thinking about buying a new pair of running shoes in the next 24 hours. The product being sold isn't ad space anymore. The product is certainty. The product is a prediction. And what is the raw material for this prediction factory? It's everything. It's every account you've ever created, every item you've ever put in a shopping cart and abandoned, every like you've ever clicked on social media, the viewing habits tracked by your smart TV, the location data from your coffee shop's app, the fact that you used sign-in with Google on that news website. Each of these is a tiny, seemingly insignificant scrap of data. But when you feed billions of these scraps from millions of people into a sophisticated machine learning model, it starts to see patterns. It learns that people who buy a certain brand of organic yogurt and also listen to 90s alternative rock are 27% more likely to respond to an ad for a vacation to Costa Rica in the month of March. Why? The machine has no idea. It doesn't need to. It just knows it's a winning bet in the global casino of human attention. This all comes together in a process that happens faster than you can blink. It's called real-time bidding. In the few milliseconds it takes for a web page to load on your screen, a silent, lightning-fast auction is held. A signal is sent out to a marketplace with a packet of information about you, your age range, your location, your recent browsing history. Hundreds of companies, armed with this data, then bid against each other in real time for the right to show you an ad in that little box on the side of the screen. The highest bidder wins, and their ad appears. All of this, the auction, The bidding. The ad placement happens before the page has even finished rendering. Let's trace the flow of this invisible money, cause the mass aggregation of billions of user profiles filled with data from their accounts and online activities created the most comprehensive dataset on human behavior in history. Effect. A new prediction market emerged, where powerful algorithms could forecast future consumer behavior with astonishing accuracy. Consequence. These behavioral futures became a tradable commodity. Trillions of dollars in global commerce were reallocated to this system, where companies could pay to deliver a specific ad to a specific person at the specific moment they were most likely to be influenced. The meta commentary here is about the sheer, mind-bending strangeness of it all. Our most mundane digital actions are the fundamental inputs for a high-frequency trading market that determines who gets to influence our thoughts. You liked a picture of a friend's new puppy. It was a tiny, insignificant dopamine hit for you. In that same instant, that like was registered, analyzed, and used as a bid modifier in a dozen micro-auctions for a slice of your attention. We are all, collectively and unknowingly, the unpaid factory workers producing the raw material for the wealthiest companies in human history. This is the engine. This is the economic gravity that holds the entire account-based universe together. But even this model has a weakness. It still relies on you making a one-time decision to buy something. What if they could eliminate the decision? What if they could convert that one-time purchase into a permanent, recurring payment? The final evolution of the account economy was at hand. The great prediction market was humming. A multi-trillion-dollar invisible engine fueled by our clicks, our purchases, and our anxieties. It was a masterpiece of surveillance capitalism, capable of targeting us with ads so specific they felt like they were reading our minds. But for all its power, the model still had an inefficiency, a flaw. It still, at the end of the day, relied on persuading you to make a conscious, one-time decision to buy something. What if that decision, the very act of the purchase, could be eliminated? What if a company could get you to say yes just once and have that yes echo every single month, forever, without any further input from you? Welcome to the end game, the final boss of the account economy. Welcome to the age where every single product becomes a service. This was the last, most profound pivot. The goal was no longer to sell you a thing. The goal was to sell you access to the thing. Indefinitely, the foundation for this was software as a service, or SaaS. In the old world, you would go to a store and buy a box containing a copy of, say, Microsoft Office or Adobe Photoshop. You would pay a one-time fee of a few $100s, and that software was yours. It might become outdated, sure, but the version you bought would work on your computer forever. You owned it. In the new world, that model is extinct. You don't buy Photoshop anymore. You subscribe to the Adobe Creative Cloud for $50 a month. You don't buy Microsoft Office. You subscribe to Microsoft 365 for $10 a month. The moment you stop paying your monthly tribute, the software, the very tool you rely on to do your job or your creative work, simply stops functioning. It becomes a useless icon on your desktop. You have been successfully converted from an owner into a tenant, and your account is the meter that the landlord checks every month to make sure you've paid your rent. This model, which perfected the art of turning a product into a recurring bill, was so obscenely profitable that it spread like a contagion to every other corner of the economy. Media was the obvious next step. We stopped buying CDs and DVDs and started subscribing to Spotify and Netflix. We no longer own a music or movie collection. We pay a monthly fee for access to a vast, ever-changing library that is controlled by someone else. News websites threw up paywalls, turning information into a subscription service managed by your account. But the final, most audacious frontier for this model was the world of physical objects. This is where the absurdity reaches its zenith. Let's talk about cars. You go to a dealership. You negotiate a price. You pay $50,000 for a physical, tangible, 4,000-pound machine made of steel and glass. You own the title. It is, by every traditional definition, your property. The car is manufactured and delivered to you with heated seats already installed. The heating coils, the wires, the buttons, all the physical hardware is in the car you own. But if you want to activate them, you have to log into your car's mandatory account and pay the manufacturer, say, BMW, $18 a month. If you stop paying, they send a remote signal and the button on your dashboard stops working. Let's just pause and appreciate the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of this. Cause companies across all industries, from software to manufacturing, desperately sought the predictable, perpetual revenue stream of a subscription model over the uncertainty of one-time sales. Effect, the as-a-service model was aggressively applied to everything, software, media, and now even the basic features of physical products you supposedly own were locked behind a recurring monthly or annual payment. Consequence, the very concept of ownership was rendered obsolete. We became perpetual renters of our own possessions. Our continued access to the core functionality of the tools and objects in our lives became entirely conditional on our uninterrupted participation in a dozen different payment plans, all managed through our accounts. This is it. This is the full realization of the vision that began with that first, innocent little checkbox offering to save your shipping details. The ultimate goal was never just to know what you buy. It was to convert you from a customer into a subscriber, from a one-time transaction into a predictable annuity. They didn't just want to sell you a house, they wanted to own the house and then install a digital meter on every light switch, every faucet, and every doorknob, and send you a separate recurring bill for every single one of them for the rest of your life. Your account is the master key to your own home, but they are the ones who charge you for it every month. The system was now complete. The account was no longer just a record of the past or a tool to predict the future. It had become a gateway to the present, a toll booth through which our monthly payments flowed, just to keep the lights on in our own digital and physical lives. But what did it feel like to live like this? What was the cumulative toll of being a tenant in your own life? The system was complete. We had been successfully converted from owners to tenants, paying monthly rent on everything from our software to the heated seats in our own cars. The account, our digital avatar, was now the conduit for an endless series of recurring payments. And what did it feel like to live in this new subscription-based reality? At first, it felt great. It felt like freedom. No more big, scary, one-time purchases, just a small, manageable monthly fee. It was easy. It was modern. But then, slowly, quietly, without any single dramatic event, the bills began to multiply, and the monster we had invited into our homes revealed its true form. It wasn't one big, scary monster that you could see and fight. It was a hydra, a creature from myth, with a dozen different heads, each one demanding its own small, seemingly insignificant blood sacrifice from your bank account every single month. Cut one off, and two more seemed to grow in its place. This was the 10th subscription hydra, and we had all, collectively, become its keepers. Let's count the heads. There was the video streaming head: Netflix, Disney+, Hulu, Max, Peacock, Paramount+, a constellation of services you needed just to keep up with the cultural conversation. Then the music streaming head: Spotify or Apple Music, a non-negotiable utility for modern life. The productivity head: your Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace subscription, the rent you paid to do your job. The commerce head: Amazon Prime, the annual tribute for the privilege of free shipping. Then the news head, the gaming head, the cloud storage head, the fitness and wellness head, Peloton.com, Headspace. And then the truly weird, miscellaneous heads: the Adobe subscription for that one time you needed to edit a PDF, the car manufacturer's subscription for your remote start feature, the smart doorbell subscription for cloud video storage. Each head, on its own, was manageable. It was just the price of a fancy coffee, the most insidious marketing phrase ever invented. $9.99 here, $14.99 there, $5 for this, $18 for that. None of them felt like a major financial decision. But this was death by 1,000 cuts. The true cost was invisible because it was distributed, a silent, automatic drain on your resources. Polls began to show that the average person was spending over $100 a month on these subscriptions, and this is the crucial part. When asked to estimate their own spending, they would guess a number that was less than half of the real total the hydra was feeding, and we didn't even know how much we were giving it. This led to a new, distinctly modern form of exhaustion: subscription fatigue. Cause: the triumphant, widespread adoption of the everything-as-a-service model meant the average consumer was now juggling a complex portfolio of a dozen or more recurring monthly payments. Effect: a sense of being overwhelmed set in. Users were drowning in the sheer number of services to manage, the constant low-level financial bleed, and the cognitive load of tracking different billing dates, passwords, and impending price hikes. Consequence: this created a state of personal finance chaos. People were routinely paying for subscriptions. They had completely forgotten about the dreaded subscription creep. The total monthly cost for access to modern life had become a massive, unexamined line item in household budgets, silently consuming the money that used to go toward savings or actual, tangible purchases. The meta commentary here is on the diabolical brilliance of the model from the corporate side. The system is designed to profit from your inattention. The perfect subscription, from a business perspective, is the one you sign up for and then forget you have. It's the gym membership model, but applied to the entire economy. A one-time purchase requires you to be motivated in that moment. A subscription only requires you to be motivated once, and then it leverages your natural inertia and forgetfulness for months or even years. We were told this was simpler, but it's not. It's only simpler for the company's revenue forecast. For us, we had all become the unpaid part-time accounts payable manager for a messy small business called our lives. We were tired. We were overbilled. We were paying for 5 different video services and still couldn't find anything to watch. The cumulative weight of all these tiny rents was becoming unbearable. The fatigue was real, and a backlash was brewing. Not a quiet, clever rebellion with burner emails, but a loud, angry, and financially motivated one. It was time to start cutting off the heads. The 10 subscription hydra, that multi-headed beast of recurring payments, had grown fat and complacent, feeding on the quiet, automatic withdrawals from our bank accounts. It assumed our inertia was permanent. It assumed our fatigue would lead to resignation. It made a critical, fundamental miscalculation. It assumed we would learn to fight back with the only weapon. We had left the unsubscribe button, and so the great unsubscribe backlash began. It wasn't a coordinated revolution. It was a chaotic, spontaneous, and deeply rational uprising of individual wallets, faced with the crushing weight of a dozen monthly bills and the economic pressure of the real world. We, the users, collectively decided to change the rules of the game. If the corporations were going to treat us like tenants, then we were going to start acting like airbnb guests. We were going to stay for the weekend, use the good towels, and be gone before the cleaning fee was due. This new, mercenary behavior is known in the industry by a single, dreaded word: churn. And it became the user's ultimate countermeasure. The video streaming wars were ground zero for this new tactic. A new, must-watch season of a hit show would drop on a streaming service, let's say HBO Max. On Friday, millions of people, acting independently, would perform the same maneuver. They would subscribe. They would enter their credit card details, log into their brand new account, and spend the entire weekend binge watching every single episode. And then, on Sunday night, with the season finale still fresh in their minds, they would navigate to their account settings and click cancel. Subscription. The company, which had dreamed of getting a full year's subscription fee, would get $16 for a single month, and next month, when a new show dropped on Disney+, the user would perform the exact same churn and burn maneuver over there. We had all become special ops consumers, tactical agents in a war of our own making. Our mission: get in, consume the high-value asset, and get out before the next billing cycle. It was a frantic, exhausting, monthly game of financial whack-a-mole. You'd check the calendar. Okay, the new season of that show is out, so it's time to unsubscribe from Netflix and resubscribe to Hulu. Need to edit a few photos for a project. Time to activate the Adobe subscription for 1 month. And then immediately set a calendar reminder to cancel it in 29 days. Let's follow the chain of this chaotic rebellion. Cause: overwhelmed by subscription fatigue and facing real-world economic pressures, consumers could no longer afford to be passive, long-term subscribers to a multitude of competing services. Effect: a new, hyperactive user behavior emerged: strategic churning. Users began to tactically subscribe and unsubscribe from services on a monthly or even weekly basis to access specific content or features on demand. Consequence: this wreaked havoc on the subscription economy's business model, which was built on the assumption of predictable, recurring revenue. Companies were now thrown into a constant, expensive, and desperate battle to retain and reacquire the same pool of fickle customers over and over again. The companies, of course, declared war on churn. They couldn't make it illegal, so they made it as annoying and emotionally taxing as possible. They deployed a whole new generation of dark patterns, specifically for the cancellation process. This is the please don't go flow. You click the unsubscribe button, and a journey of 1,000 clicks begins. Step 1. A pop-up asks, "Are you really sure?" Step 2. A mandatory survey forces you to explain your reasons for leaving, a tiny bit of free market research for them on your way out the door. Step 3. A screen full of movie posters appears, desperately reminding you of all the amazing content you're about to lose. And then comes the final, most desperate move: the bribe. A new offer materializes. WAIT. Before you go, what if we offered you 50% off for the next 3 months? It's the digital equivalent of a clingy ex-partner begging you not to leave, promising they'll change. It's a manipulative, guilt-inducing gauntlet designed to make you just give up and let the subscription renew. The meta commentary here is that we had finally found a way to assert our power, but at a significant cost to our own peace of mind. The supposed simplicity of the subscription model had been exposed as a lie. To manage it effectively, you had to become a ruthless, hyper-vigilant accountant of your own leisure time. We had won the battle, perhaps, but in doing so, we had accepted the exhausting terms of the war. We were all now part-time strategists in the great global subscription wars. A miserable job that nobody asked for and nobody wanted. The backlash was real. The churn was terrifying for investors. The golden goose of recurring revenue was looking a little sick. The industry, in its desperation, knew it needed a new justification, a new, grand, almost spiritual reason for why we needed to stay subscribed, stay logged in, and keep feeding them our data, even as we jumped from ship to ship. They needed a narrative so powerful it would make everything that came before seem like ancient history. They needed a new god. The subscription model was showing its cracks. The churn and burn rebellion had turned predictable revenue streams into a volatile mess. The narrative of personalization, once so seductive, was starting to sound thin and creepy. The great corporate empires needed a new story. A new, grand, unimpeachable justification for their endless hunger for our data. A reason so profound it would make all our previous concerns seem petty and short-sighted. They needed a new religion. And right on cue, descending from the server farms in a blaze of venture capital and incomprehensible mathematics, the new god arrived. Its name was artificial intelligence, and just like that, everything changed, overnight. Every company on Earth became an AI company. The pivot was instantaneous and universal. The justification for the account, for the constant tracking, for the endless data collection, was elevated from the mundane to the messianic. The pitch was no longer, "Give us your data so we can show you a slightly more relevant ad for a pair of socks." The new pitch was, "You must give us your data, your photos, your private conversations, your professional emails, your half-finished novels, your very consciousness, so that we may feed it into the glowing matrix of our nascent superintelligence. Your humble contribution will help us build a smarter, better, more efficient future for all of humanity." This was the master stroke. I became the ultimate excuse for everything. It was a retroactive absolution for the sins of the last 2 decades. All that creepy, invasive data they collected for ad targeting, that wasn't for something as grubby as mere commerce. No. It was all for science. They were painstakingly assembling the largest dataset on human behavior in history, not for profit, but as a noble, foundational act for the great project of building a true AI. Your privacy wasn't violated. It was generously contributed to the digital library of Alexandria. It was the ultimate historical revisionism. The beauty of AI as a justification is that it is all-encompassing and forward-looking. It's not just about what you did yesterday. It's about what the machine can become tomorrow. As the subscription economy faltered and public cynicism grew, a new technological gold rush around generative AI created an insatiable demand for massive amounts of human-generated training data. Corporations immediately pivoted their entire narrative. User data and engagement were no longer framed as inputs for marketing, but as vital, noble contributions to the grand project of training the AI. This provided the perfect, unassailable justification for all past, present, and future data collection. It gave companies a pretext to analyze every piece of data they had ever collected under a new, more powerful lens, and to demand even more intimate forms of data, such as our direct conversations with the AI chatbots they now deployed everywhere. This created the perfect self-perpetuating machine. Step 1. We give our data to the company to train their AI. Step 2. The AI becomes more powerful. Step 3. The company uses that powerful AI to perfect the very tools of the account economy. The AI learns how to write more persuasive, emotionally resonant copy for the confirming pop-ups. It learns how to design more addictive, gamified loyalty programs. It learns how to dynamically adjust subscription prices and retention offers in real time to minimize churn. We were now actively helping to build a more intelligent version of our own prison warden. The snake was eating its own tail, and we were the snake. The moment this new reality snapped into focus was when the social media platforms realized the true value of their archives. For years, sites like Reddit and Twitter had relatively open APIs, allowing researchers and developers to access their data. The instant the AI gold rush began, those doors slammed shut. They put enormous price tags on that access, explicitly stating that their vast, chaotic archives of our flame wars, our bad jokes, and our heartfelt confessions were now an incredibly valuable asset for training large language models. The digital landfill had been reclassified as a diamond mine, our throwaway content. The exhaust fumes of our social lives had become the fuel for the next technological revolution. So this is the new pact. We are no longer just consumers. We are all, now, unpaid data labeling technicians for the AI revolution. Every captcha we solve to prove we're not a robot is, ironically, teaching a robot how to see. Every question we ask a chatbot is providing it with a free lesson in human conversation. The system had found its ultimate purpose, its final, unarguable justification. So, after all of it, the convenience, the blackmail, the walled gardens, the subscriptions, and now, the divine mandate of AI, where does that leave us? What is the final, settled state of our relationship with the account economy? The new god of artificial intelligence was in its heaven, the data was flowing, and the great predictive machine was humming along, getting smarter by the nanosecond. And so, after 2 decades of this relentless evolutionary pressure, where did that leave us? What did we, the users, the tenants, the test subjects, the unpaid factory workers of this grand new economy, finally do? Did we rise up in a glorious, system-crushing revolution? Did we delete our accounts, throw our smart devices into the sea, and go live in cabins in the woods? No, of course not. We sighed, we rolled our eyes, and we clicked accept. This is the final stage. Not a bang, but a whimper. Not a rebellion, but a collective, exhausted, and deeply cynical resignation. We have arrived at the new normal, a state of being where we are all fully aware that the game is rigged, but the cost and effort of refusing to play are just too high. The fight is over, not because one side won a decisive victory, but because one side simply outlasted the other, integrating itself so deeply into the fabric of reality that to oppose it is to oppose life itself. Trying to live in the modern world without creating an account is like trying to live in a modern city without using money. You can try, but you're going to have a very bad and very hungry time. This isn't apathy. Apathy is not caring. We care. We just don't have the energy anymore. This is a state of learned helplessness on a global scale. We know that the free service is paid for with our data. We know that the personalization is just sophisticated manipulation. We know the loyalty program is a trick. We know the buy now button is a lie. We know the company will probably lose our data in a breach and send us a meaningless apology. We know all of it. And we sign up anyway. Because we want the 15% discount. Because we need to see that one show. Because our friends are all on that platform. Because it's just easier. This is the age of cynical convenience. We now navigate the digital world not as wide-eyed believers, but as weary, battle-hardened veterans. We perform the rituals required of us with a sense of detached irony. We click accept all on the cookie banner, not as an act of consent, but as an act of defiance against the banner itself, a way to make the annoying box go away. We play the subscription whack-a-mole game, churning and burning through streaming services, not out of brand loyalty, but as a rational response to an irrational system. We use our password managers and two-factor authentication, not because we trust the companies, but precisely because we don't. Let's trace the final, weary steps of this journey. Cause, after 2 decades of escalating corporate tactics, the account-based data economy became so ubiquitous and essential for basic life functions that opting out ceased to be a realistic option. For the vast majority of people, users, no longer naive but too exhausted to fight every battle, entered a state of mass resignation, practicing a form of cynical, eye-rolling compliance with the system's demands. Consequence, we have collectively, and for the most part silently, accepted a new social contract. In this contract, our personal data is the default, non-refundable currency for participation in society. Our email address has become the universal rent we pay to exist in the modern world. The great dystopian writers of the 20th century worried about a single, all-powerful big brother, a top-down surveillance state that watched everyone from a central, ominous tower. They weren't entirely wrong, but they missed the business model. We didn't get one big brother. We got 1,000 little brothers, each a different corporation with its own app, its own account, its own terms of service. And we didn't have surveillance forced upon us. We actively invited it into our homes, into our pockets, and into our lives, in exchange for free shipping and a playlist that really gets our mood. It's a stranger, more comfortable, and somehow more insulting dystopia than anyone ever imagined. And so we're here. We've accepted that a certain level of surveillance is the price of admission to the global theme park. Our email address, that simple string of characters that was once just a tool for communication, has completed its transformation. It is now your passport, your social security number, your credit score, and your permanent, non-refundable security deposit, all rolled into one. It is the rent you pay for the privilege of shopping, and the landlords are never, ever going to stop collecting. And so, here we are, perpetual tenants in a world we helped build, paying our monthly rent for things we used to own, with a currency of personal data we can never truly get back. It is, by all accounts, a deeply weird and inequitable arrangement that somehow became the invisible foundation of everything. Now, our lawyers, who communicate with us via secure, subscription-based platform, have insisted that we remind you not to take any of this as financial, legal, or ethical advice. This was a highly dramatic, over-caffeinated sprint through the decades of digital capitalism. Not a user manual for the apocalypse. It was, however, almost certainly more fun to listen to than reading a 60-page privacy policy. If there's another piece of modern life that feels broken, another system that seems to be quietly gaslighting you, send it our way. We're always looking for the next thing to ask. Why is this still a thing? And that's how that whole mess went down. Until next time, don't trust the algorithm.